Hello guys, this is Code with Vlad, and in this tutorial we are going to try to understand what is JavaScript and why is it useful. So you don't need to install anything, you can just use your browser. In fact, every browser comes with JavaScript built in. And here I am using Firefox, it's just my preference. You can use Chrome, you can use any browser, but in order to use JavaScript in the browser, you need to right-click and inspect the element, and it will open you the developer tools. In the developer tools, you can see basically what's behind all that website. You see it's very fancy here, you have some images, you have some buttons, some text. Well, all that is HTML, and this is what you see here, HTML document. On the right, you see the CSS, and this is a styling language, while HTML is more like of a text, what kind of content you put on your website and what kind of hierarchy you have. So you see you have a div, inside you have a main, inside you have a section, so it shows the hierarchy and the content of the website, while the CSS here shows the styling. So for instance, if I want to inspect that element, which is I believe a text, a paragraph, so P, I can go in the CSS and change the color. So you see, those two work together. Now what you don't see here is JavaScript. JavaScript is the programming language that can make websites interactive. We're not going to go really into details of JavaScript. I just want to show you how JavaScript is useful by example, so you can easily understand it and relate to it. So in order to do that, you need to navigate to the console. So every browser has a console tab. Here we have a console on Firefox. I click there. I will just zoom in so you can see it better. And let's make it bigger. And I'll just clean here all the messages here. Cool. So this is a JavaScript console. It's called a REPL. So basically you can execute here the code here, and it will show you some stuff, so you can really scaffold, you can really test some stuff directly in your browser. You don't need to install any code editor, any framework, it's just there. You can try it with me. Okay, so all the programming languages have all those things in common. Like they have like 4 things. They have variables, they have data structures, they have loops, and they have functions. And that's basically the core of any language. So we're going to very quickly brush off all those elements with you so you can very easily understand why it's useful. So variables are a bit like things where you put other things. So it's like saving something in memory, you know? So for instance, that could be x is equal 42. It could be my variable is equal hello world, which is a text. So for instance, if we want to declare a variable in JavaScript, we use let. That just means that we declare a variable, then we give a name to the variable. So let's say x, and equal is when you assign something to the variable, and let's put a value to the variable, and the value will be 42, right? So now we saved something in memory. So in order to see what's inside, JavaScript has a functionality called console.log, and you just put the variable name inside it. Oops. Sorry, console.log x, and it shows you 42. So variables can be different. They can be integers, like here. They can be floats, like let y. Let's declare another one is equal 1.5. That will be a float. So same thing, but we are going to print the y 1.5. It can be like texts. So we can do y is equal hello. Texts are in single quotes or in double quotes. Basically everything that's in single quotes or in double quotes, JavaScript understands it as a text. So you can do the same thing here, and it will show us the text hello. You can really have a lot of different types of variables. Here I just showed you some numbers, some floats, some text. You can have more complex stuff. We're not going to talk about those, but there's one I want to talk about. It's called arrays, and it's very easy to understand what arrays are. Imagine you have a bag and you're going to the shop. In your bag you have a wallet, you have keys, and you have, let's say, an apple, right? Well, To create something like that, to represent the content, a list of things inside something, we use an array. So an array in JavaScript is brackets, and inside you put the elements that are inside that array, separated by commas. So in our case, it will be wallet, it will be key, and it will be apple. That's what we said. And if I do like that, it will say it's an array and it has 3 elements inside it. And very important in arrays, to get those out of the array, we need to use indexes. So here you see you have 0, 1, 2. The reason why it's 0 is because in programming we count from 0 every time. There's like 1 or 2 languages where they count from 1, but most of the time we count from 0. It's just a convention, it's just how it is. So if I want to get the first element of the array at index 0, we will do something like bracket 0, and it will return us the wallet. So this is not very useful. Let's save that in a variable and let's call it bag. Let bag is equal, and we're just going to copy that because in programming we're quite lazy. Bag, and same thing, if I press bag, it will actually reference that array. So you see, variables allow you to save things in memory so you can later use them. So instead of like recreating that again and again every time I want to do something, I can just save that in a variable and work on that. So let's clean the console here, and everything is still safe, so I can still get my bag. And let's get the second element of the bag. Well, simply bag and brackets like we saw just before, and 1, right? And it will get us the key. If I get 2, it will get us the apple. If I get 3, it will not work because there's no 4 elements. So remember, we began counting from 0. So if we press 3, it will say undefined. Well, it doesn't exist. Yeah, so you see everything that we have defined, X, Y, a bag, does exist. If I want to get something that does not exist, so for instance bags, it will throw me an error saying, oh, bags does not exist, you haven't declared that variable. So those are like variables, those allow the JavaScript to save things in memory and to work with that. It's just a way to easily work with that. The reason why I introduced arrays is because there's another building blocks in almost all programming languages. It's called loops. Imagine you have an array of millions and millions of elements. You won't be able to manually do something with those, like they're too big. There should be a way to programmatically kind of loop through it, iterate through it, and do some stuff if you want. So for instance, if we want to replace all the stuff that's in array by something else, well, it will be possible with a loop. So loops, there's like a gazillion ways of doing those loops in JavaScript, but I'll show you one where we are going to print all the content of the array with a loop. So in order to do so, we have to use for, and then we need to kind of declare a variable that will temporarily save the value we want to reference. So let's say value, it's up to me how I name those, of bag. So basically what it means is that we are going to loop through all the elements of that array bag, and for every element we're going to save that in a variable called value. So we can do something with that value inside of a loop. So I want to log that, I want to console log that value. So we're going to do that, console log value, and it will print all the content of the array. So this is what loops are for. They are for doing like those bulk operations. Here it's a simple console log, but it can be something more complex. And yeah, also very important, variables are case sensitive. So that means if I put something like value with a capital letter, that won't work. It needs to match exactly what we defined. So it will say value is not defined, the same as it said with bags is not defined, because we need to really reference the exact same name. Okay, cool. Now we've seen almost all the building blocks of a programming language. There's one left. It's called functions. Functions are kind of chunks of code that you can execute several times. So you can reuse. It's like reusable chunks of code. Because in programming we are very lazy, we don't want to write the same code and again and again and again and again. we can just put that in a kind of a box and then just call the box, just execute the box without really caring what's inside the box. So let me show that. Let's declare a function. In order to declare a function, we just use the word function. We give a name, my function, and that's just how you write it. And inside the function, we can say console log I love functions, right? And we have declared that function, right? So now it just declared. It's a bit like a variable. We have assigned a function. Now, in order to execute it, in order to call it, we need to do something like that. My function, and place just parentheses at the end. And every time I will do that, it will call the code inside the function. So here it's a simple console log, so it will just say I love function. And the nice thing about functions is that I really can call them how much I want. So I can do it again and again and again and again. That's the whole purpose of functions. I put some code inside it and I can execute it. Let's say you have like 100 lines of code like that. Well, I don't care. I just have my functions and all my code will be executed, and I know that I can trust my function to do the same code and again and again. So that's it, folks. That's basically the main building blocks of the programming languages. Now let's look how JavaScript is really useful in the browser, what it does basically. Because here I just show you some functionalities of the JavaScript, how it works. Now let's see how it's implemented in your web page and why it is useful. So let's hide that a bit. And here you have this amazing web page from Firefox, and let me reload that. So so if we inspect the elements, so here, this one, you have P. P is paragraph, and you have some thesis on the right, and you see that the P is the child of that div element that is like above it. So with JavaScript you can actually target that P, that paragraph, and do stuff with that. So stuff like replacing the text, changing the styles, changing the colors, do some animations, right? Like whatever. It's JavaScript. The JavaScript language is really useful to make your web page interactive. So how do we do it? Well, you've seen that you have a div that has a class. A class is just a way to tag things on your web page. It's just a way to help you to work with your web page. So for instance, if you want to change the color of the P, if you just will say, I want to change the color of the P to red, it will change the color of all the Ps. And it's not the only paragraph in the page. There are like other ones, like probably here. You see, it's a P as well. So if I will say just change the color of the piece, it will change the color of all the pieces. That's not what I want. I just want to change the color of that paragraph. So how do I do it? Well, we use classes. We know that this P is the child of that specific class, and probably there's only one like that. There's only one paragraph that is a child of a div with a class like that. So we can target that with JavaScript. Let's copy that. So the browser has a lot of functionalities already implemented for use, and you just need to use the JavaScript to trigger those functionalities. So it's not like you're writing your own like plugins for the browser. Of course, you could do that, but that's not the point. The point is to use what the browser allows you to do with JavaScript. So the way to target that element is to use document, and document just means the HTML document. So it's all that thing like that. It just in a variable like we showed you before. You can put numbers, you can put floats, you can put arrays, but you can also put like a big chunk of stuff like that. So there's literally no limit of what you can put in a variable. There's really a whole type of different variables that exist. But if you understood the concept of a variable, it's very easy to understand. Basically, you put some things inside it, or you reference some things, like the variable can point to that page, for instance. So this is what we are going to do. We are going to just reference this text, and the way to do it is document.querySelector. And here in the parentheses, and it's also a function, right? It's like, remember, it looks a bit like the functions we talked about. It's just that this function is attached to that variable. So in order to target that, remember the class, the parent class was was mzpc here descend desk, and inside you have a p. So the way to do it, the way to target that p is to first you put a string, so quote or double quote, doesn't matter. Then you put the name of the class, and the class begins with a dot. That's just a convention, dot, so JavaScript knows that you target a class. And inside you have a p. So to show what's inside an element, to show what's the child of that element, we just need to leave a space, and we type the name of the element. In our case, it's a p. There's no class on it, there's no tag on it, so we need to reference it by p. And if we press enter, it will reference that same p. So very cool, right? Now again, in order to really help ourselves, because if we want to do something with that p, every time we need to write all that stuff. Let's just save that in the variable. So like we saved a number, we can put a HTML element of the page inside the variable and do stuff with that. So let's say let my paragraph, and we just need to copy paste that thing and assign that element of the page in the variable. So now every time we do my paragraph, it will reference that p. So we can do stuff with that. So let's say we want to change the text of that. So that would be something like my paragraph inner text hello world. And the texts, remember, are always in quotes or double quotes. And here we go, it just changed the text. We can put something else as well. Hello world, my name is Vladimir and I love teaching JavaScript, right? And here we go, it just changed our text, so that's really cool. But here we actually do it manually. So every time we need to manually change the text. We can also go into inspector and change the HTML directly here. Hey. So that also works, but the goal of JavaScript is to automate things, is to make things like when the mouse goes on that text becomes red. So this is what we're going to do now. In order to do that, we still have a reference of our variable here, so we still can reuse it. So let's use that variable, and we can change the color when the mouse will hover that text. So the way to do it is, again, a functionality that is implemented in the browser and that is accessible with JavaScript. So that functionality is an event listener. So you can add an event listener to an element of the page. So the way to do it is you name the variable, then you do dot. Dot is kind of a way to access stuff. So I told you that you can put a lot of stuff in a variable, and here it's what's called an object. It's a very complicated thing. It has a lot of functionalities built in. So if we do something like that here, you see that you have a lot of variables. You have a lot of things, stuff here. JavaScript can be quite complex, but you don't need to make it complex. You just need to understand why it's useful and how we can use it. So you see, you have a lot of stuff like that. And one of the functionality that it allows you to add event listeners. So we are going to add an event listener to that variable. So my paragraph dot add event listener. So you see, it even helps me because it knows it exists. And the event listener we want to add is click. I want that when I click, it changed the color. There are other like event listeners you can do on hover, you can do a lot of different things. Here I'm interested on click. It's very easy to do. Click. And there you just pass a function. That's a bit tricky. It's a really JavaScript thing, but bear with me. It just means that we have a trigger. Trigger is click, and when the trigger happens, we want to do something. So here it's just a way of writing it, it's how it's written, bear with me. And inside that trigger, inside that thing, you put the logic you want to be executed when the trigger happens. So when we click, we want the variable, so the text, become red. So it's as saying when you touch the table becomes red, you know? So it's normal that when you click the text, so we need to reference the text again, the text becomes red. So it's same as when you touch a table, the table becomes red. When you click on the paragraph becomes red. Paragraph, style, color, and all that is also available thanks to the functionalities that are implemented in the browser. We just trigger them with JavaScript. Just an example how you can use JavaScript with your browser. And let's put it red, right? So here we have programmed our trigger. So now if we click the text, it will become red. So I hope that you liked this tutorial. As you see, it's very easy to understand what is JavaScript and why it is used for. So here it's a very simple example where we change the color of a text based on an event. It can be very complex. It can be when you click there, something here on the page disappears or appears, some animation happens, and this is what we use JavaScript for, to make the web page interactive. It can also be something more complex, like do a request to a server, get some information from another website and inject that in the page. This is also possible. I hope you enjoyed this tutorial, and leave a comment, leave a like, share it. It will really help me to do more of those, and see you later.